Okay, sounds good. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our profile today of Roswell and Beyond. It's part of our Learning from Home series. And welcome to the Hewlett-Woodmere Public Library. Uh, my name is Dr. Bill THIERFELDER, and I'll be your host today. For those of you who do not know me, I'm a retired professor of arts and humanities and docent emeritus from the American Museum of Natural History in New York. I live in Portland, Oregon, where I'm speaking to you from today, and where I'm an artist, a writer, and a lecturer. But I do return regularly to New York, where I continue my work at the Museum of Natural History and enjoy the wonders of the Big Apple. Now, because we can't cover every aspect of this topic in about a 75-minute framework here, I invite you to take a deeper dive on my website, makingwings.net, and you're going to go to Roswell and Beyond. So let me demonstrate. So it's one word, makingwings.net. And you should now be seeing that on your screen. This is the home page. And all you do is you go up to the upper right corner, little hamburger menu there, click on that. You're going to see a whole bunch of stuff in the drop down. Please feel free to visit any of them, but one of them is called Roswell and Beyond. And if you go there, what you are going to get is all kind of material. It's a huge page. It's everything you wanted to know and we're afraid to ask. Reports, background information, websites for, was it a conspiracy? Did it really happen? It didn't happen. And then we're going to talk about a number of these things today in our presentation. Project Blue Book, uh, fascinating scientist J. Allen Hynek, Area 51, many of you may have heard of that. And then recently, there have been a number of reports by the United States government and congressional hearings. So, really quite something. And even this year, a Pentagon report. I also have printed general web resources. And again, let's just pick the first one. All you have to do is click on, and hopefully, yes, you will be brought to the page. And then when you're done, you just click it off, and then you're back on my page. So it's one-stop shopping. My goodness, noteworthy UFO sightings. You're getting the picture. There's just so much stuff here. Organization called MUFON. We'll talk about that. Other aspects of, yes, there is actually a word for it, ufology, 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 and all kinds of stuff. And what really all of this goes to is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. We'd like to know that maybe we're not alone. So much stuff there, and I even haven't shown you half of it. So you get the idea. Have fun. One of the places that I have presented this program today is in Connecticut at the Southbury Library. And someone there sent me a picture from the late 1980s of a UFO sighting right there in Waterbury, Connecticut. And it was part of a wave of UFO sightings in the 1980s called the Hudson Valley Wave. So this is very much part of our experience, the human experience, this fascination with UFOs. Now, everything that you're going to hear in this program today uses the web resources and the books that you saw on my website. And you saw there's a lot of stuff on my website. For this presentation, I especially used the following sources to build both its structure and the script itself. Wikipedia, History Channel, especially the History Channel, space.com, terrific website, the Library of Congress and other United States government documentation, and a really terrific book by Garrett Graff called UFO, which is very much a skeptic's presentation of the topic, but very balanced. It's a great little book. Now, one of the things that you saw on my website was a selection of recommended media. And for a great overview, I highly recommend the History Channel's beautifully illustrated UFOs and the Search for Alien Life. Of course, the granddaddy of books on the topic is Eric von Daniken's 1968 classic, Chariots of the Gods, which interestingly enough was originally published with a question mark after the title to indicate that the book was an inquiry as well as a statement. In his book, this is a terrific little book, the day after Roswell, retired Army Colonel Philip Corso claims he stewarded extraterrestrial artifacts recovered from a crash near Roswell in New Mexico in 1947. More about all of that, of course, as we go along. And Annie Jacobson has written a very thorough and thought-provoking study of Area 51, which is an alleged hotbed of UFO experimentation. Now, for those of us who like exploring the possibility of intelligent life on other planets, then Lawrence Doyle's Reflections of a SETI Scientist, SETI stands for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, it's a wonderful memoir by a man who was in the vanguard of the search for extraterrestrial life. Exoplanets by Michael Summers and James Trefil examines the thousands upon thousands of planets that have been discovered just in our galaxy alone. Could one or more of them harbor life? Probably. Could one or more of them harbor intelligent life? That's the big question. A question that lies at the core of any serious examination of the Roswell incident and UFOs. And if you like some scientific viewing pleasure, I find the Science Channel series, How the Universe Works, to be superb. There are 11 seasons that can now be streamed online, and there are several episodes over the years that examine the topics of exoplanets and the possibility of life on those worlds. But if you want some fiction stirred in with your facts, well, then the 2 seasons of the History Channel show Project Blue Book might be your cup of tea. And we're going to be talking about the lead person on that show, scientist J. Allen Hynek, and Project Blue Book a little later in the program. And this series studies Hynek's life and his work on the project. So what are we going to be doing today? First, we're going to give a quick overview of the Roswell incident in July of 1947. Then, in order to understand the importance of Roswell as a seminal event in the modern study of UFOs and extraterrestrials, we'll look at 11 famous sightings, other aspects of alien inquiries, government investigations, and finally, the search for extraterrestrial life and alien worlds. So let's get started with Roswell itself and then branch out. Now, this video will give you a good thumbnail sketch. Now, there's one caveat. There is still some debate about the actual date of the crash. Apparently, the UFO crashed in mid-June of 1947 on or near the ranch of a man named Mac Brazel near Corona, New Mexico. It's a town just a little northwest of Roswell. However, Brazel didn't turn over the debris to the local sheriff until July the 6th of 1947. And that's why a lot of people consider July the anniversary of Roswell rather than mid-June. Okay, with that said, you may have to adjust the sound level on your devices, but there is fairly accurate closed captioning. So let's do this. Okay, here we go. Fingers crossed that it goes full screen.
Maybe the most well-known alien conspiracy surrounds the infamous Roswell UFO incident. So, what really happened? Is there a logical explanation for this event, or is there a chance that it actually is an alien encounter? Let's find out in today's episode of
Colossal Mysteries.
It all started on June 14th of 1947, when a rancher in New Mexico named William Mac Brazel found something strange while out on horseback, about 30 miles north of a small town called Roswell. He came across clusters of wreckage and debris that looked like some kind of plane had come crashing down from the sky. The crash site was full of large hunks of metal, rubber strips, tinfoil, and all kinds of strange bits and bobs. Puzzled by the peculiar find, the rancher decided to collect the materials from the site. The next day, Brazel read reports in the paper about an unidentified object flying over the area at night. 2 days later, Mac Brazel got up the nerve and told the local sheriff what he found. But if Brazel is to be believed, the sheriff whispered to him that he may have found a flying disc and that he should keep it confidential. The sheriff then contacted Roswell Army Airfield, who visited Brazel's ranch, collected the wreckage, and asked him to keep things under wraps. Of course, he didn't. And almost overnight, local newspapers and tabloids were writing stories about the unidentified crash. More stories ran about the witnesses seeing strange, charred creatures inside the airfield. And before long, the well-known UFO conspiracy theory was born. So, is there a chance that Mac Brazel stumbled across an authentic alien crash site near Roswell, New Mexico all those years ago? Or is there an explanation for what they found? Immediately following the incident, the U.S. military announced that the so-called flying saucer was nothing more than a run-of-the-mill weather balloon that had crashed during a windstorm. Newspapers who printed headlines about flying saucers issued corrections, and the Roswell flying saucer incident seemed to be over. The Roswell story quickly faded from the headlines, but interest in aliens and UFOs kept growing across the country. It seemed as though the Roswell incident was all but forgotten until the early 1980s, when two UFO researchers wrote a book about the incident. In their book, the duo claimed it was all a government cover-up. Aliens were actually found at the crash site of the UFO. Experts, government agencies, and members of the military all disputed and debunked the book's claims. But by this point, it was too late. A spark was lit, and before long, more conspiracy theories started popping up around Roswell and other possible UFO sites across the country. And as it turns out, skeptics and conspiracy theorists weren't entirely wrong to doubt the official Roswell story. The government wasn't telling the whole truth when they claimed a weather balloon crash near Roswell. In 1994, the U.S. Air Force finally admitted that the weather balloon that crashed near Roswell wasn't your average aircraft. It was a secret U.S. spy balloon that was part of a top-secret program called Project Mogul. Their objective? Monitor Soviet nuclear tests by detecting sound waves in the upper atmosphere. The tech was quickly surpassed by other, more advanced methods, but it took the military over 40 years to disclose the truth. Since the balloon was involved in a Cold War cover-up, rumors could grow. And what about those charred alien bodies people reported seeing at Roswell Army Airfield? Well, turns out there's an explanation for them too. A 1997 Air Force report determined that the alien bodies were actually parachute crash test dummies that had been burned up in an accident. But for those who still believe, all these explanations amount to nothing more than a giant government cover-up. And it's safe to say, nothing is going to change their minds on that. And now you know a little bit more about the not-so-mysterious Roswell UFO incident.
And indeed, now you do. Now, that gives you a background, and I think from a reasonably skeptical point of view. Now, as an aside to what you just saw in that video, One of the great questions raised by the Roswell incident and other similar UFO crash events is this: why so many crashes? I mean, if extraterrestrials are so advanced, why do they keep crashing into our planet? Well, certainly one explanation that UFO researchers, also known as ufologists, cite is the hazards of space travel. Think, for example, of how many missions to Mars we've lost. Well, at this point, we've had as many failed missions as successes. And it's certainly an interesting question, isn't it? And it's an incident like Roswell that's helped to spark such a question. So, from Roswell, okay, so that's kind of your background. I'd like to branch out and explore some other UFO events. Now, obviously, this is a subjective list. There are hundreds, thousands more that we could explore. But for our purposes, here are some that are very well documented and that I think you might find interesting. And one of the most intriguing accounts of an unidentified flying object from ancient times is the great wheeled chariot in the sky that the Old Testament prophet Ezekiel witnessed, dating Chariots of Fire. Remember the title from the movie, right? Dating from around 600 BCE. This Bible passage is one of the more fascinating ones, possibly suggesting that our ancient ancestors were actually visited by an advanced race of aliens rather than heavenly beings like angels. Now, this idea, known as the ancient astronaut theory, sees Ezekiel's vision, air quotes vision, of the Merkaba, the name for the wheeled chariot, as more likely to be a spaceship or a space shuttle used by an advanced species to reach out to humans. Well, Eric von Daniken is one of the biggest proponents of this theory, providing a very compelling argument for an alternative interpretation of the book of Ezekiel. So compelling, in fact, that NASA scientist Joseph Blumrich wrote a book supporting the possibility of Daniken's hypothesis. And a lot of these ancient sightings, scientists today, ufologists say, well, the ancient people didn't have words to describe things like spaceships and aliens. So they created terminology like, wheels of fire and archangels and cherubim, etc. Now, moving forward in time, we have a broadsheet news article printed in April of 1561 from Nuremberg, Germany, that describes a mass sighting of celestial phenomena. According to the report, around dawn of April the 14th, many men and women of Nuremberg saw an aerial battle coming, quote unquote, out of the sun and observed hundreds of spheres, cylinders, and other odd shaped objects moving erratically overhead. Now, the woodcut from that report from 1561, I put that up on your screen, and it depicts what is now considered one of the earliest verified reports of a mass UFO sighting. So that picture you're seeing on the screen is an actual lithograph, woodcut, I should say, from 1561, depicting what literally thousands of people claim to have seen. Now, during the last 2 decades of the 19th century, there were mysterious reports from around the world of mysterious airships. And one of the most famous incidents occurred in Aurora, Texas, on April the 17th of 1897. According to an account in the Dallas Morning News, a UFO crashed on a farm near Aurora after experiencing what was probably equipment failure, resulting in the death of the extraterrestrial pilot. The article states that as the ship was crashing, it collided with the water tower of Judge J.S. Proctor's windmill and went to pieces with a terrific explosion, scattering debris over several acres. The pilot, presumed to be the sole occupant, was killed. Examination of his remains indicated that, quote unquote, he was not an inhabitant of this world. Well, believe it or not, a funeral in the local cemetery was planned for the alien on April the 20th. Papers found on his body after the crash contained writings, quote unquote, in some unknown hieroglyphics, which appeared to record the pilot's travels. These markings were later put on a grave marker near where the alien was supposedly buried. A Texas State Historical Commission marker outside the Aurora Cemetery, which is the alleged burial site of the UFO pilot, mentions the incident, characterizing it as a legend. So there's actually a historical marker put up by the state of Texas. Our fourth famous encounter is the so-called Battle of Los Angeles, which is the nickname given by contemporary sources to a rumored attack by Imperial Japan on the night of February the 24th of 1942. Now, this incident occurred less than 3 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and one day after a Japanese submarine fired artillery shells at naval targets in Santa Barbara, California. A lot of people forget that, yes, the Japanese actually did make some attempted attacks on the west coast of the United States. Now, initially, the target of the aerial barrage was thought to be an attacking force from Japan. But Secretary of Navy Frank Knox called the purported attack a quote-unquote false alarm. Now, that barrage lasted for hours, and spent shells falling back to the earth did significant damage to some areas of the city. Now, though the Navy eventually blamed all of the hysteria on a weather balloon, which still seems to be the go-to explanation for any unknown aerial phenomena, the story has since become part of UFO lore. Some ufologists claim that what people saw wasn't a squadron of enemy planes, but alien spacecraft investigating a world at war. Now, the term Foo Fighter was used by Allied aircraft pilots during World War II to describe various UFOs, or mysterious aerial phenomena, seen in the skies over both the European and Pacific theaters of operations. And yes, the group, the Foo Fighters, took their name from these Foo Fighters. Now, what I'd like to do is I want to give you a little History Channel video that does a very succinct job of explaining these famous unidentified aerial phenomena. And in it, you're actually going to see a moment from Joel Hynek, who's the son of Dr. Alan J. Hynek, and we're going to learn more about Dr. Hynek a little later on. But that Joel Hynek is Dr. Hynek's son. But anyway, here you are, History Channel, Foo Fighters. And again, fingers crossed that it goes full screen.
November 1944. One of the early interesting Foo Fighter reports comes from the 415th Night Fighter Squadron. They're flying missions over northeastern France. That's not far from Germany. And this is still in Nazi-occupied part of France, where you've got a number of lights, 8, 10, 12 lights coming in on the left of the aircraft group that are apparently maneuvering in a very unusual way and then just take off at a very high rate of speed. This type of thing was reported many times.
The pilots often described these objects were sort of fuzzy lights that could be a plasma light that would come up from the ground towards the airplane. And we know that now because there have been reinvestigations of all the files. At the time, of course, there was no Air Force. It was the Army Air Force. They were taking reports from pilots very, very seriously. because if there was a new German weapon, all the pilots needed to know about it, and they needed to think about evasive action.
These objects were called different things at the time before they got a name, and the name that stuck was Foo Fighters. And it comes from a comic strip that was popular at the time called Smokey Stover. And he had a saying, which was, where there's a foo, there's fire. The US government has never offered an explanation for the Foo Fighters. We know that the OSS, which was the precursor of the CIA, investigated. We know that British intelligence investigated this, and we don't have conclusions.
Dr. Hynek, he was just as puzzled as I think anybody else.
My father would refer to the Foo Fighters as sort of an example of something that, here's something fairly serious that we should look into, or, is worthy of investigation, at least supports the idea that there's something going on that we don't understand and we should look into.
So there you have a little bit about the Foo Fighters. Blank these out here. Okay, now we're going to go back to our presentation here. So the Foo Fighter incidents are important because they become some of the first documented by reliable military pilots. I'm going to do a little more about that also later in the program. Righty, let me, oops. Something here. Sorry. Having fun here. There we go. And that brings us to number 6, which is the Mount Rainier UFO. This UFO sighting occurred on June the 24th of 1947, just 2 weeks before the Roswell incident was reported in the papers. A private pilot named Kenneth Arnold claimed that he saw a string of 9 shiny, unidentified flying objects flying past Mount Rainier at speeds that Arnold estimated at a minimum of 1,200 miles an hour. This was the first post-World War II sighting in the United States that garnered nationwide news coverage. Arnold's description of the objects also led to the press quickly coining the terms flying saucer and flying disc as popular descriptive terms for UFOs. Well, now to round out our list, I'd like to look at some post-Roswell incidents that became part of the media afterglow of the New Mexico crash in 1947. Again, without Roswell, many of these events would probably not have gotten the media attention that they did and still do. And that's where I slightly disagree with our initial video about Roswell in general, that Roswell was kind of forgotten for a while until books started coming out in the 70s and 80s. It wasn't really completely forgotten because when these other incidents happened, a lot of people said, oh, this reminds us of Roswell, right? So this number 7 takes place just before midnight on July the 19th of 1952. At Washington National Airport, which is now Ronald Reagan National Airport. An air traffic controller spotted 7 unidentified flying objects near the nation's capital. The controller asked colleagues to double check what he was seeing, and they confirmed that the equipment, the radar equipment, was indeed working properly. And what they could see was not following typical flight patterns. Not long after, other bright objects were seen hovering over the White House and the Capitol building. Fighter jets were scrambled from a nearby Air Force base, but the UFOs disappeared from the radar and from sight when the fighter jets arrived. When a lack of fuel forced the jets to return to their base, the radar detected UFOs again, leading the controllers to believe, aha, the mysterious crafts were intercepting and understanding radio traffic from ground control. Well, by daybreak, the objects were no longer visible to a radar or the human eye. And that was the end of it until the fact that the following weekend, guess what? The strange phenomena happened all over again. Well, ultimately, the Air Force claimed the event was weather related. Okay. not a weather balloon, but weather related. But other military authorities, even military authorities, disagreed, saying that temperature inversions, for example, were already well documented radar anomalies, and what happened in Washington, D.C. was not related to an inversion. So, was it a true cover up? Did the Air Force know more than they said? And officials simply wanted to quell public panic? We still don't know for sure. Now, I'm sure some of you have seen this movie, but in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, there's a very famous scene in which a UFO makes the electronics in a car go absolutely haywire. Well, the real life inspiration for that scene came from an incident in 1957 when dozens of citizens of Levelland, Texas, individually reported seeing a rocket or strange lights that interfered with their vehicles. Engines died, lights cut off. Well, they cut off and on actually randomly, and car radios suddenly blared static. Now, though the police initially thought the reports were a hoax, when they went out to investigate, guess what? They too saw the mysterious lights, and the same things happened to their patrol cars. So it's quite something. Now, a government task force assigned to investigate the case declared that it was an electrical storm and ball lightning that caused the lights and the mechanical malfunctions, despite the fact that there were no reported thunderstorms in the area that night. That task force, by the way, was Project Blue Book, and we'll be talking about them in a little bit. Now, a decade later, in 1961, our number 9 event made worldwide headlines. And I'd like to play the first 2 minutes of a segment from the History Channel series Ancient Aliens to give a concise explanation. Betty and Barney Hill, abduction. What are we talking about here? So let us go here, fingers crossed. Okay. Close captioning. And here we go.
September 19th, 1961. According to news accounts, Betty and Barney Hill were driving through New Hampshire late at night when a large flying saucer rapidly approached them and then hovered over their car. They saw strange figures through the windows of the craft. And mysteriously, the couple also reported complete memory loss of the 2 hours immediately following the encounter.
No one really knows to this day what Betty and Barney Hill saw. However, the details of their case do reflect on various other versions of alien abduction. I say alien abduction because some of the pieces of information that they discuss, the loss of time, seeing beings that actually came out of this craft and associated and interacted with them, and they weren't human.
Ultimately, under hypnosis, they recall being brought out of the car and taken aboard the ship, that it was a legitimate abduction, and that Betty pleaded with her captors, if you will, that not to harm her as she laid on this table and experiments were done on her, like a needle being inserted into her stomach. Barney relates a number of skin samples and sperm being taken from him.
The beings described by Betty and Barney Hill fit the classic case of a gray. Now, there are variations to size and dimensions of these beings, but they all seem to have the same characteristics. Slim, spindly bodies, large oval heads, large oversized eyes.
The Hills were the first documented case of an alien abduction in modern time. But it is not the last.
And indeed, it is not the last, but this was probably one of the first widely spoken about abductions. Now, most of Betty Hill's notes, tapes, and other items have been placed in the permanent collection at the University of New Hampshire, her alma mater. And in July of 2011, the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources marked the site of the alleged craft's first approach with a historical marker. And thanks to these events, countless other alleged abductions have been reported. Now, for our penultimate example, we move forward to 1980 and the famous Rendlesham Forest incident in Suffolk, England. The occurrence is the most famous UFO event to have happened in the United Kingdom and is sometimes referred to as Britain's Roswell. And here is a short video that fills you in. And again, you may have to adjust the sound. The closed captioning is pretty good. Let's do this. And here we go.
Rendlesham Forest, Suffolk County, England. 200 miles east of Rudloe Manor lies 6 square miles of woodlands that has become notorious as the site of Great Britain's most incredible UFO encounter. On December 26, 1980, near an airbase leased to the United States Air Force by the RAF, strange lights are reported on the horizon in what appears to be a possible downed aircraft. 2 U.S. servicemen are dispatched to the site. According to accounts, radios failed as they approached the targeted area, and the air itself felt electrically charged as they closed in.
Strange lights were seen about 300 to 400 meters away from an area what was called the East Gate. And the patrolling officers at the East Gate saw the lights above the forest, and they thought potentially it was a downed aircraft or an aircraft in distress. So 2 of them, Sergeant Penniston and Airman John Burrows, went further into the forest.
Once at the so-called crash site, the men observed a strange triangular craft on the ground, approximately 3 meters wide at its base.
It appeared to be either hovering or on legs, and it had clearly come down into this small clearing and smashed some of the branches off the trees. So there was physical evidence which was looked at afterwards. And so the men looked at this strange object.
I noticed that there was an inscription on the side of the aircraft. I was expecting to find, I don't know, USAF, something like that. And what I find is glyphs, pictorial glyphs, making no sense at all. And then I was running my hand over the side of the craft. It was very warm to touch. At this time, we were getting the feeling of electricity that was just bouncing. It was much, much stronger. There was this feeling of being drawn into it or being pulled into it. Like someone was holding a picture of zeros and ones in my mind's eye.
The strange vision Sergeant Penniston had upon touching the craft has made this one of Britain's most famous UFO encounters.
Absolutely. And let me just tune that one out. So that is considered kind of Britain's Roswell. Now, last but not least, we have an event that is now considered the impetus for the current interest in UFOs by both the US government and the scientific community. The USS Nimitz Tic Tac UAP. On November the 14th of 2004, fighter pilot Commander David Fravor of the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group reported that he saw an oval object hovering above the ocean. He estimated that the object was about 40 feet long. Fravor and another pilot, Alex Dietrich, said in an interview that a total of 4 people, 2 pilots and 2 weapon system officers, witnessed the object for about 5 minutes. A second wave of fighters, including pilot Lieutenant Commander Chad Underwood, took off from the Nimitz to investigate. Underwood's fighter was equipped with an advanced infrared camera and recorded a video and coined the description Tic Tac to describe the infrared image because it looks like a tic tac. In 2017, the Pentagon, many years later, right? The Pentagon finally released UAP videos, which are selected visual recordings of cockpit instrumentation displays from United States Navy fighter jets based aboard aircraft carriers, the USS Nimitz and the USS Theodore Roosevelt in 2004, 2014, and 2015, with additional footage taken by other Navy personnel in 2019. Well, these four grainy monochromatic videos, these Tic Tac videos, widely characterized as officially documented UAPs, have received extensive coverage in the media, certainly since 2017. Publicity surrounding the videos has prompted a number of theories, including drones, human observational and interpretive error, and yes, speculations of alien spacecraft. Well, now that we've looked at the Roswell crash and other well-known UFO events, let's explore some other aspects of ufology. Thanks to the Roswell incident, we now have many offshoot studies exploring the idea of extraterrestrials, unidentified flying objects, and other kinds of mysterious, potentially related phenomena. Now, here are just a few fields of examination. Well, first of all, of course, are the aliens themselves. Probably the most famous are the so-called Greys. You heard about them in the Betty and Barney Hill video. These are these 3 to 4 foot tall beings with thin bodies, somewhat bulky heads, and famously large eyes. But in addition to the Greys, there are other reported alien species, including the rather terrifying looking reptilians made popular in film and the television series Doctor Who. Oh, and then we have the enigmatic Men in Black. In popular culture and UFO conspiracy theories, the Men in Black are purportedly men dressed in black suits who claim to be quasi-government agents who harass, threaten, or sometimes even assassinate witnesses to unidentified flying objects to keep them quiet about what they have seen. They are mysterious and dangerous and very much part of UFO lore, and actually quite different from the rather comedic representation of them in the films about Men in Black. In real ufology, the Men in Black are very mysterious and often very sinister, and as you can see from the expression on the face here, not particularly taking things lightly. And then we have more about cover-ups and conspiracies, and probably the biggest, thanks especially to the impact of Roswell studies, well, Area 51. Now, Area 51, located 83 miles northwest of Las Vegas, is the common name of a highly classified United States Air Force facility within the Nevada Test and Training Range. A remote detachment administered by Edwards Air Force Base in California, the facility is officially called Homey Airport or Groom Lake, after the salt flat next to its airfield. The intense secrecy surrounding the base has made it the frequent subject of conspiracy theories and a central component of UFO lore. According to theorists, extraterrestrials have been examined at Area 51, and UFO technology has been reverse engineered. The CIA finally acknowledged the base's existence publicly in 2013. Gee, that only took 7 decades. And declassified highly redacted documents detailing its history and purpose. And by redacted, I mean when you get a sheet, it's like all blackout. You know, there may be 2 words that you could see, and everything else is blacked out. Now, the surrounding area is a popular tourist destination, including the small town of Rachel, Nevada, located on what is now referred to as the extraterrestrial highway. And yes, that is an actual highway sign there on the road, Highway 375. Now, another serious aspect of ufology studies has been the topic of communication. Have aliens from another world communicated with us, or have we in our past tried to communicate with aliens whom we construed at that time to be gods or heavenly beings? Well, according to some ufologists, one way extraterrestrials have contacted us is through crop circles. The term was first coined in the early 1980s to describe elaborate designs that usually appear overnight in grain fields. While many have admittedly been hoaxes, just as many remain unexplained and defy explanation. How did they get there? Who made them? Although obscure natural causes or alien origins of crop circles are suggested by fringe theorists, there really is no scientific evidence for such explanations. And all crop circles are consistent with human causation. But who knows? The truth is out there somewhere. Well, if aliens have attempted to contact us, have we attempted to contact them? Well, ancient alien theorists have long suggested that a prime example of attempted communication is found in Peru. The Nazca Lines, which were declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1994, are a group of hundreds of geoglyphs made in the soil of the Nazca Desert in southern Peru. They were created over a 1,000-year period between 500 BCE and about 500 CE by people making depressions or shallow incisions in the desert floor. Now, some of the Nazca lines form shapes of animals, plants, and strange alien-looking beings that are best seen from the air. The largest figures are huge, measuring about 400 yards in length. Because of its isolation and the dry, windless, stable climate of the Nazca Plateau, the lines have mostly been preserved naturally. But the Nazca lines aren't the only geoglyphs on the planet. Around the world, we can find small-scale carvings called petroglyphs that also display this vast array of strange and mysterious flora and fauna. What makes these images, both the geoglyphs and the petroglyphs, what makes them so astounding is that they were created independently by cultures that had no contact with each other, and yet they all look alike. Now, here's a short video from the History Channel that takes things to the next step. Let's look at this. Okay. And here we go.
When the now legendary Nazca Lines of Peru were first discovered in 1927, they were considered a unique phenomenon. But now, with the benefit of satellite imagery, thousands of ancient geoglyphs are being found all over the world. In Kazakhstan, in the southwestern United States, in the Atacama Desert of Chile, and in Bolivia.
Almost everywhere around the world, we find what are known as geoglyphs, whether they be the Nazca Lines in Peru, British geoglyphs, to those in the Middle East. They're something that are virtually universal around the world, and they have been appearing for many hundreds of years.
But why would ancient people, in so many different locations around the world, all be making signs that can only be seen from above?
We don't know for sure what ancient peoples were trying to communicate through geoglyphs, but the most important thing is the amount of time and effort that went into building them. They're not quick sketches, many of them whole community projects. And the time that you spend working on them is time not spent gathering food, not spent defending your land. It's time not spent looking after your children. So the first thing that they communicate is to the community itself what is important to the community.
But could there be another, even more incredible explanation? Is it possible that these ancient geoglyphs were created not for a terrestrial purpose, but for an extraterrestrial one? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and suggest further clues can be found by examining similar shapes and symbols that occur on a much smaller scale.
Geoglyphs are gigantic sized versions of what we know as petroglyphs. The most obvious being the rock art that we'd see on surfaces of stone rock around the world that date back many, many thousands of years.
Petroglyphs are images carved into stone, so incised or hammered away. They occur all over the world, from Australia up through Asia, Europe, Africa, through the Americas.
Perhaps more intriguing than the petroglyphs themselves are the eerie similarities between them and their geoglyphic siblings.
We see certain symbols recurring again and again. There are many geometric forms. These take the form of spirals, of concentric rings, and other more rectilinear or abstract designs. They're something that are virtually universal around the world.
One of the most interesting geoglyphs that you have at Nazca is the Sun-Star Cross geoglyph, which is really a very complicated, huge mandala of interconnected stars and triangles. And it's something we see all over the world, in Tibet and India, as mandalas and even yantras. So things like this that are so geometrically complicated and are found all over the world indicates that there was some kind of worldwide symbolic language that was brought here by a higher intelligence, probably extraterrestrials.
Well, you do or don't have to buy that aspect of it, but it is certainly a fascinating concept. You know, all these different symbols around the world, some of them absolutely mathematical and geometric, by cultures that supposedly didn't have that math to make geometric figures. So anyway, mainstream scholars continue to differ in interpreting the purpose of the designs, but in general, most mainstream archaeologists and sociologists ascribe religious significance to them. So whether they're all about aliens or all about gods, well, that's one of the hot topics of ufology, anthropology, and archaeology today. A topic that came to the fore after the Roswell incident ignited a firestorm of both mainstream and fringe scholarship. Well, meanwhile, we have to ask, why were we trying to communicate with alien beings? Beyond paying homage to creatures we thought to be gods, some theorists suggest we were accepting their help in constructing some of our ancient monuments. Question that has always puzzled archaeologists as well as ufologists is how these archaic buildings, like the pyramids at Giza, which you see on your screen, could possibly have been built by cultures that often lacked the wheel and other kinds of modern equipment. Well, here are just three among dozens. Let's visit Pumapunka, which is a 6th century CE monumental collection of ruins in western Bolivia. At Pumapunka, we find several miniature gates that are perfect replicas of once standing full-size gateways. In addition, the foundation platform is believed to have supported as many as 8 colossal gateways. At its peak, Pumapunka is thought to have been adorned with polished metal plaques, brightly colored ceramic and fabric ornamentation, and visited by costumed citizens, elaborately dressed priests, and nobility decked in exotic jewelry. What is remarkable and currently inexplicable is the extraordinary accuracy of the engineering. It defies our current understanding of a culture that supposedly lacked any kind of sophisticated machinery. Well, ufologists suggest, well, did extraterrestrials help create such precise holes and perfect 90-degree angles without any kind of machinery? Well, yes, indeed. Some ancient astronaut theorists say yes. Well, then we have the remarkable moai of Easter Island. Moai are monolithic human figures carved by the Rapa Nui people who lived on Easter Island in eastern Polynesia between 1250 and 1500 CE. Nearly half are still at the main Moai quarry, but hundreds were transported from there and set on stone platforms around the island's perimeter. Some were also buried. And almost all the moai have overly large heads, which comprise 3/8 the size of the whole statue. And many of these moai have the rest of their legless bodies buried deep in the ground. Mainstream archaeologists believe that the moai are chiefly the living faces of deified ancestors. Many statues still gaze inland towards their original clan lands. The production and transport of more than 900 statues, some over 30 feet high and weighing over 80 tons, is an unaccountably remarkable creative and physical feat. Ancient alien theorists suggest the possibility of direct extraterrestrial intervention and posit that the statues themselves are the artistic representations of alien visitors that the native people mistook for gods. But whatever, it is certainly a mystery to archaeologists. How did you move these enormous objects if you didn't have things like highways and wheels and cranes, etc.? And finally, we have probably the most remarkable archaeological site of all, Göbekli Tepe, which you see on your screen, and its sister site, Karahan Tepe, and a satellite site named Harbetsuvan Tepesi. These archaeological sites are located in southeastern Turkey and appear to be part of an enormous megalopolis in the region, one that existed thousands of years before the supposed first civilization in Mesopotamia. These sites date from 10 to 11,000 BCE and are comprised of numerous structures, including large circular structures supported by massive stone pillars. They are the world's oldest known megaliths. Many of these pillars and other larger stones are richly decorated with abstract anthropomorphic beings and reliefs of wild animals, including wild animals that did not exist in the area, including animals from Africa and Asia. Unbelievable, right? Of course, ancient alien theorists wonder whether the culture that constructed the site may have had little extraterrestrial aid, since the complexity of the monoliths and the buildings is considered well beyond the abilities of any existing human culture 11 to 12,000 years ago. Prehistorians believe that the advent of agriculture caused people to settle down rather than remain nomads. Yet, Göbekli Tepe, a monumental complex with 50-foot monoliths built on the top of a rocky mountaintop with no clear evidence of agricultural cultivation, has played a prominent role in upending this theory. Göbekli Tepe and the surrounding sites were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2018. And as of this year, 2024, only around 5% of these sites have been excavated. It remains one of the world's great mysteries and a field day for ancient alien theorists. And by the way, the thing that really astonishes archaeologists and scientists is the fact that these remarkable structures were buried purposefully. This isn't the sands of time burying it. we have absolute evidence that once they were built at a certain point in time, people schlepped billions, with a B, of tons of dirt and covered them over. Why is that? Well, if ancient aliens helped to build these monuments and perhaps cover them up, then how did those aliens get here? Which brings us back to UFOs and UAPs. Over the past 7 decades, there have been several studies to try to uncover the origins of these miraculous crafts and their passengers. Now, in the United States, probably the most well-known and controversial probes into this topic was Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was the code name given for the systematic study of unidentified flying objects by the United States Air Force from March of 1952 to its termination in December of 1969. The project, headquartered at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, was initially directed by Captain Edward Ruppelt and followed earlier projects of a similar nature, such as Project Sign and Project Grudge. I like that one, Project Grudge. Project Blue Book had 2 goals, namely to determine if UFOs were a threat to national security and to scientifically analyze UFO-related data. Thousands of UFO reports were collected, analyzed, and filed. The Air Force supplied the following summary of its investigations. No UFO reported, investigated, or evaluated by the Air Force was ever an indication of threat to our national security. There was no evidence submitted to or discovered by the Air Force that sightings categorized as unidentified represented technological developments or principles beyond the range of modern scientific knowledge. And there was no evidence indicating that sightings categorized as unidentified were extraterrestrial vehicles. Well, by the time Project Blue Book ended, it had collected 12,618 UFO reports and concluded that most of them were misidentifications of natural phenomena or conventional aircraft. However, 701 reports were classified as unexplainable, even after stringent analysis. The UFO reports were archived, and currently they are available under the Freedom of Information Act. But as you can see from the picture I've just put on your screen, names and other personnel and personal information of all the witnesses has been completely redacted. So you only have a few words here or there. But, technically, they went along with the Freedom of Information Act. Well, probably the most famous name associated with Project Blue Book was J. Allen Hynek, who was an American astronomer, professor, and in later life, an avid ufologist. He acted as the chief scientific advisor to Project Sign, Project Grudge, and then Project Blue Book from 1952 until Project Blue Book shut down in 1969. Now, initially hired by the Air Force to debunk UFO claims, Hynek began disagreeing publicly with the conclusions of Blue Book. By the early 1960s, after about a decade and a half of studies, Hynek's apparent turnaround on the UFO question was an open secret. Only after Blue Book was formally dissolved in 1969 did Hynek speak more openly about his quote-unquote turnaround. In 1977, at the first International UFO Congress in Chicago, Hynek presented his thoughts in his speech, "What I really believe about UFOs. I do believe," he said, "that UFO phenomena as a whole is real. Regarding hypotheses of extraterrestrial intelligence, ETI, and extra-dimensional intelligence, EDI, Hynek continued, there is sufficient evidence to defend both." And he concluded with this bold statement: I hold it entirely possible that a technology exists which encompasses both the physical and the psychic, the material and the mental. There are stars that are millions of years older than the sun. There may be a civilization that is millions of years more advanced than man's. We have gone from Kitty Hawk to the moon in some 70 years, but it's possible that a million-year-old civilization may know something that we don't. I hypothesize an M&M technology encompassing the mental and material realms. The psychic realm, so mysterious to us today, may be an ordinary part of an advanced technology. Well, needless to say, so-called mainstream scientists thought Hynek had become a crackpot. Well, true believers, well, they felt they'd finally found an advocate. By the way, one last word about Hynek. Today, he's probably best remembered for creating the close encounter scale. Close encounters of the first kind are visual sightings of an unidentified flying object, seemingly less than 500 feet away. Close encounters of the second kind, go there, are UFO events in which a physical effect is alleged. This might be interference in functioning of a vehicle or electronic device, like the Levelland, Texas case, animals reacting, or some kind of physical trace, like impressions in the ground or scorched vegetation or a chemical trace. Close encounters of the third kind are UFO encounters in which an animated entity is present. These include humanoids, robots, and humans who may be occupants or pilots of a UFO. Now, later ufologists added close encounters of the fourth kind, which is a UFO event in which a human is abducted by a UFO or its occupants, and close encounters of the fifth kind, which is direct communication between aliens and humans. And by the way, this is a little bit of fun movie trivia. When Steven Spielberg created his famous film Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1977, he cast Hynek in a small cameo role as himself. Now, little to no official study of UFO phenomena was undertaken in the United States after Project Blue Book shut its doors. So for ufologists, it was a great surprise and a great relief that a government report on UFOs was released in June of 2021. The report was called Preliminary Assessment Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, and that's that UAP you sometimes hear rather than UFO, same thing. It has also been misnamed the Pentagon UFO report. The report wasn't funded by the Pentagon. It was actually a federally mandated assessment prepared and published in June of 2021 by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. It summarized information regarding unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, including unidentified flying objects, UFOs. Substantial public attention was given to the report, fueled by statements by former high-level officials in the US government, including former President Barack Obama, who stated in June of 2021, there's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. So even President Obama is something of a agnostic on the topic. Well, less than a year after the UAP report came an official congressional hearing. On May the 17th of 2022, members of the United States House Intelligence Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Counterintelligence, and Counterproliferation, now there's a title for you, held an all-day hearing with top military officials to discuss military reports of unexplained aerial phenomena, UAPs. It was the first public congressional hearing into UFO sightings in the US in over 50 years, and was certainly one of the most serious examinations of military testimony since the Foo Fighters incidents of World War II. Now, though no official conclusions were drawn, both the UAP report and the congressional hearing affirmed that there are definitely unidentified aerial phenomena and sightings that cannot be explained with our current understanding of physics and aviation, including the famous Tic Tac videos that I just popped up there on your left. Now, since 2022, there have been annual congressional meetings, and in 2024, there was a Pentagon report. Probably the biggest bombshell so far occurred during the 2023 congressional gathering when David Grush, you see him on your screen, an Air Force intelligence officer retired with the rank of major, categorically declared that he saw reports that were unknown to the public. He sought whistleblower protection after claiming that the US government was operating with secrecy and above congressional oversight with regards to UAP, even claiming that crashed UAPs had yielded biological material of non-human origin. The Pentagon has denied his claim. He also said he'd suffered retaliation after reporting this information to his superiors and to multiple inspectors general. And that's from the PBS NewsHour. Now, the United States is not alone in its official investigations. Once the Roswell incident became widely known, both private citizens and military personnel in other countries started to report UFO sightings, and several nations opened up their own formal probes. Here are just four. GAIPAN, which stands for Aerospace Phenomena Research and Information Group, that's a unit of the French Space Agency, has a mandate to investigate unidentified aerospace phenomena and to make its findings available to the public. And it has done that since 2007. Every year it publishes. It's one of the most transparent UFO investigation units in the world. The Soviet Union had Institute 22, which was created in 1978 by the Academy of Sciences and the Ministry of Defense in the Soviet Union. Its mission was to investigate UFOs in the Soviet Union. Institute 22 was a secret organization for 13 years until the fall of the Soviet Union, and can be compared to the American Project Blue Book. The United Kingdom created Project Condign, which was a secret unidentified flying object study undertaken by the British government's Defense Intelligence Staff between 1997 and 2000. The results of the project were compiled in a 400-page document that was released into the public domain in 2006. The report concluded that UFOs had an observable presence that was indisputable, and found no evidence to suggest that they were hostile or under any type of control. And finally, in 1997, the government of Chile created CEFA, the Committee for the Study of Anomalous Aerial Phenomena. It's an official body of the General Directorate of Civil Aeronautics, which studies UFO phenomena that occur in the airspace of Chile. And it remains one of the largest investigative bodies underwritten by a major government. And all of that brings us, as we start aiming towards our conclusion here, all of that brings us back to those primal questions that the Roswell incident put squarely in the public eye. Are we alone? Is there life out there? But of course, these questions were being asked long before 1947. The great astronomer, for example, William Herschel, and his sister Caroline fundamentally remade humanity's perception of the universe with their scientific discoveries. But Sir William thought wildly out of the box, and he had strong convictions that there was such a thing as extraterrestrial life. Well, as a scientist, Herschel couldn't prove his speculations about life beyond Earth, and therefore he did not publish such ideas in scientific journals. However, his philosophical essays and his personal correspondence finally published in 1912, showed how keenly he and his sister Caroline believed in extraterrestrial life and civilization, and how tirelessly they both looked for aliens. Oh, and then there's Percival Lowell. Lowell was an American businessman, author, mathematician, and astronomer who fueled speculation that there were canals on Mars. He founded the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona, and created detailed maps of the so-called Martian canals, inspired by similar research by the Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli. These maps fueled speculation that a superior civilization on the red planet was more than capable to visit Earth, potentially for all the wrong reasons, as H.G. Wells hypothesized in his 1898 bestseller, The War of the Worlds. Now, in the post-Roswell era, post-1947 era, the astronomer Frank Drake, who passed away in September of 2022 at the venerable age of 92, presented to the scientific community what is known today as the Drake equation. He did this at a conference that he hosted in 1961 at the Greenbank Observatory in West Virginia. You see that on your screen. This equation attempts to estimate the number of active extraterrestrial civilizations in the Milky Way and summarizes the concepts that scientists must contemplate when considering the question of other radio communicative life, including the number of stars that might have planets, the number of possible habitable planets, the fraction of life that becomes intelligent and communicative, and the average time civilizations might be detectable. That 1961 meeting was one of the first scientific conferences focusing on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence and gave scientific weight to the study of life beyond Earth. Many scientists now believe that the number of habitable planets in our galaxy alone probably numbers in the hundreds of millions. Who knows how many of them bear civilizations? Well, today we have the search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute, SETI, which began in 1985 under the chairmanship of the astronomer Jill Tarter. Over the years, other research disciplines have been added to the Institute's portfolio, all unified by their relevance to the search for and understanding of life beyond Earth. Today, the Institute has approximately 100 scientists, as well as specialists in administration, education, and outreach. It currently uses the 42 massive telescopes of the Allen Radio Telescope Array in Shasta County, California, to conduct its studies. If you go to SETI's website, www.seti.org, you can find out about current leaders in the search for intelligent life beyond Earth, including Andrew Semyon, who is the director of SETI Research, and Seth Shostak, who is a senior astronomer. By the way, Jill Tarter, who remains on SETI's board of directors and an emeritus consultant for SETI, was the model for the character Ellie Arroway in Carl Sagan's novel Contact, made even more famous by Jodie Foster's portrayal in the 1997 film version. If indeed we have been visited by extraterrestrial beings using advanced transport methods, their civilization must have originated on a home world somewhere beyond our solar system. Many important missions by NASA, the European Space Agency, and other agencies around the world have been created to discover exoplanets, planets that exist beyond our solar system's 8 planets. Today, the James Webb Space Telescope continues that search. Are there habitable worlds out there? Worlds that could support intelligent life, civilizations that could visit Earth? And have they visited? Are incidents like the one at Roswell in 1947 and thousands of others over the span of recorded human history proof that visitations have indeed happened? Can we say with some assurance, we are not alone? Well, that's an idea that will continue to spark the human imagination. So, thanks to an alleged UFO crash in Roswell, New Mexico, 77 years ago, the floodgates have opened on a whole field of scientific inquiry, debate, and controversy, ufology. If you're interested in doing further research, either as a believer or a skeptic, you might find the Mutual UFO Network, known as MUFON, a great place to start. MUFON is a US-based nonprofit organization composed of civilian volunteers who study reported UFO sightings. Founded in 1969, it's one of the oldest and largest organizations of its kind, claiming thousands of members worldwide, with chapters and representatives in more than 43 countries and all 50 states. I've provided some background as well as a link on my website. So, 80 minutes. There you have it, Roswell and beyond. And as they say on the X-Files, the truth is out there. Well, once again, if you want to do a deeper dive into the topic, please visit my website, makingwings.net, and click on Roswell and Beyond. So now it is time for your thoughts and ideas. And thanks for being here today.